All right, man. Well, thanks for coming out, Bill.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me out here, man. You got a great setup. This is awesome.
I appreciate it, man.
This is goals for me.
Yeah, it's funny is like we were talking about Andy and how big of a turd he was.
I
Um,
thought we weren't going to talk about that.
I know. We just got to bring up old shit. Um, but Andy's kind of way of setting up his studio, his office, where he walks across the street, does jujitsu, walks down the street, gets a cup of coffee from his coffee shop.
Yeah, yeah,
I I should have known that earlier on in business because everything I created was like distant, far,
yeah,
inconvenient,
yeah,
and required me to be on the road like 300 days a year.
yeah.
So when I kind of revamped everything, even now we're not in a studio, we're in my kitchen. It's more personable because
Hmm.
I want a more intimate setting, but I also want to be close to home.
Yeah,
And so now I'm working on like the shop, the studio, and everything else, where I can just bring people in
yeah,
and do rad stuff. And dude, like we live in the mountains.
yeah. And you said it's the Wasatch. Is that what you said?
It's
That?
the Wasatch Mountains, yeah.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Uintas as well.
It's beautiful.
I thought Spartan Forge
Yeah,
was a knife company
it makes sense.
when I first heard it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Why Spartan Forge?
I'm a nerd.
Yeah,
Like I'm sure you remember like staff and officer rides and stuff like that, like
yeah, yeah,
in
yeah,
the military.
yeah.
I had a colonel that I had worked for at one point when I was out in the 66th MI group.
Hmm.
And we went like did the Battle of Thermopylae and like the Spartan
Oh
culture
yeah,
and all of that type of stuff and the hot gates.
yeah.
And I
Gates of Fire. I'm sure you read that.
yeah, I haven't read that yet.
Really?
Actually, no, I haven't.
It's fiction, but it's good.
Oh, I was told to buy a book yesterday from Logan, and I'm gonna forget it. I can look it up, but it's about this guy who, and if you know this, I'm sorry, but he stabs Christ on the cross,
Hmm.
and he gets Christ's blood in his mouth, and Christ, this is fiction, and
Yeah,
Christ curses him, or he's cursed as a result of it,
because of
and
the
he's
blood or
because
because of
of the
this?
blood.
Okay,
Well, because of the spear and the blood.
yeah,
But then he's stuck on earth forever. He can't achieve death.
yeah.
He can't go and be one with God. And has to stay a soldier. So it's him fighting through every war, like from when Christ was born up until now.
Dude, that's
And I said,
crazy.
that sounds like the coolest book I've
That's the
ever heard
coolest.
of.
Logan brought that up.
Yeah, Logan brought that up
Ah,
yesterday to me. And I was like, so I went on eBay last night looking for them. They're hard to come by. This guy
really?
died in the 70s. Yeah, he was a Delta dude. Apparently he was in Delta. And he had an accident and was put in like a home where they were abusing him in like South America. And
Yeah.
some of his old Delta buddies found out and went down there and did some night ops and broke him out. And he died in like a place somewhere around here in the 70s.
Really?
Yeah, and he wrote these books.
And he was actually an old school Delta guy.
Yeah, old school.
Now I want to read it even more.
Yeah, I know, right?
One day.
Yeah,
So institutional knowledge he's
I'll
talking
just give you
about.
the name quick because I wrote it down last
Yeah,
night.
text it to me.
Yeah, I will. The name of it is Casca. The book
Casca.
is called Casca, Casca, or that may be his name, but either
That dude's going to be a best-selling author by the end of these conversations.
yeah. So anyway, back to Spartan Forge. I especially when we were at war during the global war on terrorism. I have a real appreciation for people that shape the battlefield.
That's on.
Yeah, it's on that shape the battlefield for their strengths. Obviously, it's Sun Tzu 101, right? Like,
Yeah.
but when people do it effectively and over a period of time, and there are problems with that whole culture, right? There are plenty of problems with it that we can talk about. But the positive parts and the parts about the campaign first, against Darius and then Xerxes and Marathon and the Hot Gates and the plains of Plataea. I just loved watching and looking at that. It was inspired from there. And so when I was getting out of the military, I was having a ton of anxiety about what I was going to do when I got out. And I was on a collection mission on a mountain. I think it was in northern Iraq. I was doing a second collection mission. And a lot of the questions that I was answering he was a first group commander at the time, or he's a guy in first group. I'm trying to remember his name and I can't. You might know him. Doesn't matter. A lot of questions I was answering. I was like, I'm building all of this infrastructure. I'm doing all of these things, and I'm trying to centralize it and make it palatable for someone who's not in tech to understand this stuff. Because that was the best way to do it. Like if I wanted to get on a con op as the nerdy MI guy, or if I wanted to be part of a cool guy operation, I'm always trying to get on something, like sell myself somehow.
Yeah.
The only way to do that, I found first as a enlisted guy, but then as a warrant officer, was to tell them why this makes sense in a way that is palatable for somebody who might have an arts degree or some other type of degree. And you couldn't just be like, we're going to find bad guy X and this is how we're going to do it. You're going to be like, no, there's these 5 things I'm isolating for. I'm doing this DF mission. I'm going to have this location, and then we're going to set up a scan eagle and do persistent ISR. I'm going to get you some GRGs. I'm going to tell you how many guys are in the building. I'm going to get you everything that you need. And that's what I'm selling. And not only that, I'm going to centralize it. At that time we were doing like this thing called JIOC, or in the S2. How do I present it now in a digital format that's easy to understand and consumable by people? So when I was on this collection mission, I was like, I could do this for hunters. I'm a hunter. Like this, I could do. So, F it. I'm going to make a bet on myself and just do this. So I started it in like 2017, and I started with a stupid name. It was Open Season Technologies. It's pretty dumb.
I like it.
Yeah. I started with that. I liked it at the time. But then I thought, what am I trying to do here? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to centralize and make palatable tools for people that want to get out there and be alone and unafraid. Like, as paradoxical as it sounds, we're an AI company, a tech company, but the goal is to get people out burning boot leather and doing things. Like, everything that I'm building doesn't replace scouting. It doesn't replace on the ground, right? Like you got to do AFAM. Like, you can't just, expect to know everything about an area before you go in somewhere. So, that's Spartan Forge. So the tools for the Spartans, like what the Spartans need to conduct operations. And that's where I came up with the name.
Well, it's interesting because you in the military, as a part of your roles and responsibilities, was you were finding and fixing the enemy.
Yep.
And when you think about the hunting component, technology is not a part of hunting right now.
Right.
It's not even close. I wouldn't say it's a part. There are technologies that are coming to the hunter, and the hunter's seeing the advantage.
Yeah.
But the idea of like data, imagery, or even an app is fairly new to hunting.
Yeah.
And then you're just basically taking all the experience you had in electronic warfare and signal intelligence and doing the finding and fixing for the person who wants to finish, so they could do all 3 on their own.
Yeah.
But utilizing an app, because when you walk me through the app and all of its new technologies, I literally was like thinking to myself, is hunting whitetail part of the cover? Because I would give this to my team guys on an op. I would be like, hey, we're doing a low vis op. This is the app that you need to use for finding the bad guy to get all the intel as a recce without risking compromise.
Right.
And we used to do it on top of the hoods of vehicles,
ATAC
on a CF-19. We're like, what's that shitty navigation software that we used to use?
ATAC.
Was it? No, before ATAC.
Before ATAC. I know what you're talking about. I'm not going to remember it because we're on a podcast right now, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was so horrible.
It was awful.
160th used to use it.
Yeah, Sora used it.
And they would use it as like they would use it as a rehearsal to fly their imaginary helicopter. And we started using it on the ground, and it was just horrible. Like, it would leave breadcrumbs, and you were like, whoa.
Don't do that.
You could leave breadcrumbs, just crazy stuff. And now looking at your app, I'm like, dude, it's insane how much technology has changed.
Yeah, I mean, I set up another company to build into a military component for this.
Yeah.
But I'm applying the same type of, like, we'll call it like operational security. Like, I'm going to start doing a lot more of the work on the blockchain. I'm going to start encrypting stuff. We're going to implement a signal protocol for the Blue Force tracker part.
Yeah.
So you can easily wipe stuff. It doesn't persist somewhere else that we can get to it or anyone else can get to it. So I've always said, like, at some point, either Spartan Forge or the military proxy for Spartan Forge, if you wanted to conduct a revolution, that would be the app to use, because we'll eventually get to integrating it to where it interfaces with SATCOM, and it's robust in that capability, and deploy other tools to make it so it doesn't even need a cell phone architecture. We did a lot of support during the North Carolina floods, where we gave, I think, somewhere around 500 free apps to the first responders and stuff, and they were using Blue Force Tracker in the context where we might use it, they were using it like, here are the water drop points, here where the roads are taken out, and then using LiDAR to say, here are alternate, like here's a logging trail to get to this house where the road's washed out.
Wow.
And using it to get in like a side by side and bring it, like on one story I got from a buddy of mine who was out there, they were getting diabetic and Alzheimer medication to a wife and her husband, and they were using the back road
To get there.
that they identified on our LiDAR layer to get
Wow.
up there in a side by side and to get those people out of there and get them the
Wow.
meds. And then it also helped their turnover because they had this huge Blue Force tracker team. There are thousands of pins in there. So they'd drop a water point, they'd put a picture. Here are the people, these are the guys in the area that you're looking for. Then they'd attach it all to a pin. And then when they were passing over, a guy was leaving, they would pass him the account. He'd log in on his phone. He had all of the information and he could access all the other information. They could share their locations, where they were, and that type of stuff. And they were able to download all these offline maps and do it without any cellular infrastructure. So that was really a feather in my hat. Like out of all of the bullshit that I learned while I was in college, about corporate social responsibility and all of that stuff, where it's like, you got to help the LBGTQs or whatever, which
Yeah.
is fine if that's your interest. But that to
Evan
me,
Hafer does that a
yeah,
lot.
a lot with Black
So does
Rifle.
Andy. Andy.
Yeah, Andy's huge on that. I didn't know how big he was on that stuff.
He's got tattoos.
Yeah, he's got to get his shirt off, which is easy to do.
Yeah.
But then you really can see them. But as far as corporate social responsibility felt, we raised like 20 grand to help out there. We gave all these free accounts.
Really cool.
And then Fox News caught wind of it and they invited me out to Fox and Friends. I got to go on Fox and Friends and talk about the support that we were doing there. So that's probably the most proud thing. Beyond, there's two things that make me really proud about the app: is that type of stuff where we can help out people who are in genuine need and do it without imposing any cost on them. But then secondly, a father and a son send me a picture of a whitetail that they harvested together, or an elk that they harvested together using the app. That stuff just jacks me up, dude. Like, that just sends me to the moon, knowing that we're playing like 3% of the part, and a father and son having a memory that's going to last them forever.
Yeah.
That's what drives me to do this stuff. And then the risk and the buying down risk and safety, and like, you're hunting with grandpa, so you're using BFT and you're showing him the ladder stand that he's in, and you can track his location and that type of stuff. Like that stuff really motivates me. So Spartan, that's how we came up with the name anyway.
Let's talk about your military career, because I just want to it kind of gives context to why and how you thought about building out this application, because you have a pretty long military experience. You were in the military when I was in the military.
Yeah.
And you worked with a lot of different organizations. What drove you to the military? What did you do through your experience? And then walk me through your career.
So I joined the military to get out of North Dakota. I grew up in like rural North Dakota. I did not fit in there at all. My family has, a lot of substance abuse stuff. I just buried two of my older sisters both died from ODs.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
I just buried one a few months ago.
How old?
She was 49.
Oh my gosh.
And then my other sister was 40.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and my younger brother went through it. He's fortunately, it looks like he's coming out the other side of it. My older brother is sober now, but he almost killed himself doing it. But he's turned his life around, super successful. But I knew that where I'm from in North Dakota, it's like, you're either a farmer or you're a banker that supports farmers, or you're in a restaurant that supports farmers, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And I didn't fit in that culture. And I knew that if I stayed out there, I've never done drugs before. I've never done like weed or anything like that. Not saying I wouldn't. I haven't done it. I haven't had time. Certainly couldn't do it while I was in the military. But I do have that, like, it's in me. It could happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can check myself and be like, maybe no more whiskey tonight. Like, you're done now.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I stayed in North Dakota, that I would probably be heading down a similar path that other people that I was with or my family were on. And the Army looked like the best way to get out of Dodge. And so, yeah, I signed on the line when I was 17 and initially joined as a 98 Juliet, which was like a electronic intelligence guy. And I focused more on like the heavy engineering side for the beginning of my career was radar analysis, radar exploitation.
That's Army?
Yeah, Army, like the guardrail systems.
Yeah.
And back when we were doing everything on like C-12s. And doing order of battle stuff for, we're going to go blanket bomb the southern part of Iraq, and we need to know where all of the surface to air missiles, man-packable or otherwise, are, geolocate all of those things. And as the war kicked off and we entered an asymmetrical uh, battle, that job fell away, and then I went into communications intelligence, like what you'd call like a 98 Charlie at that time, and I think it's a 35 something now, but I don't know. Um, so that was communications intelligence, then the language stuff that comes with that. So I did French and Russian, and then did the communications externals mapping, stuff like that, and was in a tactical ground SIGINT company. And
Like a tactical signal intelligence company would do what they would like DF, right? They do
yeah,
directionally find,
yeah, collect direction finding, low level
scanning.
voice intercept.
Yeah.
So a lot of our support was to, like, green, like first group, 10th group,
Yep.
that type of thing, deployed all over doing that type of thing, and then dropped a warrant packet, and became a warrant officer. And then from the warrant officer, I went into like, and I don't know if you got this brief. I know guys that have gotten this brief. I never got this brief, but apparently there's a briefing you can go get, or you can submit stuff to like the NSA or to other organizations and say like, hey, I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to do the X, Y, or Z or whatever. And like, here's what you can talk about. Here's what you can't talk about.
Yeah.
So I never did that briefing.
Yeah.
So I try to stay in the unclass realm whenever I talk about these things. But then I submitted for like what I guess you'd call it a special mission unit. Is that the
Yeah.
right way to
Yeah.
say it?
Yeah.
Right. Like we weren't in JSOC, but we were attacked. Like the expectation was once you finish Q school, you're now in JSOC,
Yeah.
and you're doing everything a JSOC guy would do, or somebody in the JIB or the JES would do, but you're an augmentee.
Yeah.
And you come with other stuff that the guys in JSOC wouldn't have. Like you usually are heavily tethered to like the NSA or like other organizations in a way that they're not. Like they might go in there and do like a side by side with like a TOPI, or like I'm trying not to use acronyms, like a target of primary interest, where that you might be like, hey, we're heading to the Horn of Africa. So you go to the Horn of Africa TOPI and NSA, and they'd tell you everything they know. That might last for a month or two. Our offices were in the NSA, and then we would just deploy, maintain that reach back, for the purposes of exploitation and DFing, and building the commander's picture using national assets instead of tactical assets. So I did that job for many years, and then I told you earlier, but I'll say it again. I did some advising in DARPA on like what are the new technologies and how do they need to look, and what's the form and feel, and what are the priority intelligence requirements of the commanders who are on the ground right now. Like what problems can they not solve that they need to solve, and what products can we bring to bear from DARPA, or at that time it was called the I2O office. I actually worked with one of the guys who I still stay in contact with, who worked in DARPA as a civilian, but he was the first guy that wrote like the buffer overflow to hack certain types of routers and stuff like that, and got pulled into the Clinton administration. And he was like a savant and just a great at that time a great mentor for me. So I got plugged into a lot of smarter people than I were. I just was really good at faking it. Everyone's like,
Dude, I think he's smart.
yeah, yeah. So
Maybe.
I'm gonna hang on to that guy who I know is smart, and then stay in his periphery. So I did that, and then a buddy of mine had gotten tagged to be in charge of all of the development for the Army on the ethical hacking, electronic warfare, technical support to SIGINT and HUMINT and FISINT, and a bunch of other stuff, the military intelligence program of record capacity. So I advised him for a couple of years before I sunsetted and got out of the Army.
Yeah. And
So
you just recently retired,
yeah,
right?
2021.
Wow.
Well, it
So,
was 2022 actually, but yeah.
so you're fast tracking when it comes to stories of transition, because here we are a few years later,
Yeah, yeah.
and you already have you've decided to transition into entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Is that something that you formulated on active duty and you're like, I think there's this thing that I want to do because I have a passion for hunting? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the find, fix, finish cycle, and so like there's 6 portions to that: find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze, disseminate,
Hmm.
F3AD, and I think there's actually more now. Somebody had to get an
Yeah.
OER bullet,
Yeah.
so they added a
You
couple
have
more
to add us.
acronyms.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were good at find, fix, finish actually, because that's all we care about.
Yeah.
But uh, so at that point in time, there were like Google Maps and maybe like an Onyx or something like that were out there, which were really just focused on like in the field. Like, here's your maps, here's your weather.
Yeah.
You can drop some pins. And as you know, the targeting cycle, to use a term I hate, is much more holistic than that. Like the intelligence and the ability to learn and variable analysis. And my goal as a warrant officer in the Army and now as the CEO of Spartan Forge was, how do I reduce entropy, or how do I reduce chaos or questions for somebody who's trying to do these things in a way that's centralized? How do I put all of that together in one application or into one? Um, and I thought, I can do this. I've learned how to build. I've learned how to do software applications while I was in the military. I learned how to do the ethical hacking stuff. I know better how to break systems than I do to build systems. But if you know how to tear down an F-150, you probably know how to put it back together.
Yeah.
So I just made a bet on myself and said, I can build something better than what's out there and more comprehensive. And that brought me down the entrepreneurial route, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah. It's interesting, man, because I've seen a lot of people I've worked with some companies like Eastman's Elevated,
Hmm.
Eastman's Hunting Journal. I love their family.
Yeah,
They
I
got a
know
good
Guy really
story.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're really good people. Been on their
and Ike.
podcast,
Yeah,
and they did the app thing. They
yeah,
started going down the rabbit hole app. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I do understand app development, because Philcraft,
yeah,
when I was involved with Philcraft, um, has an application, and it was a pain in the butt,
yeah,
and especially apps that require constant updates, and you have to give the new version like every week because you're fixing a bug. And this is something that the user interface is not like fire and forget. It's not like watching Philcraft survival content. You watch a
yeah,
video and you put it away, and that video is hosted on Vimeo. You're talking about an engaging process where people are like clicking on things, geotagging,
yeah,
locating,
yeah.
LiDAR. Why did you choose the app tied into hunting? Because I hear you saying like this is going to facilitate the hunt, the whitetail hunter. You might do mule deer, elk hunting, but there's so many broader subject matters, right? You could do backcountry,
Yeah.
outdoor living. You could do the defense department, but you chose to do specifically hunting. Why did you put those two things together?
Yeah, so the first thing I should say while I'm on here is we actually work with Ike and with the Eastmans, and we've integrated their tag research system into our desktop
Oh
app.
yeah,
So when you're looking for like to draw a tag out somewhere or something like
I'm
that,
so glad that's happened, because I was thinking about that. Like, if you hadn't talked to Ike and those guys,
yeah,
like that synergy, because they've built a lot,
yeah,
invested a lot, it'd be cool to.
yeah, and we put that together, and we're putting it into the mobile app as well. And I love the Eastmans. I don't know if people have seen it or not, but they did a video with, I think, Yeti, um, a few years back about his dad hunting up in
Yep.
Alaska, and that's one of the best pieces of hunting content I
Yeah.
think I've ever seen.
So what's funny is we did that video.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I did not know that.
Yeah.
So that is one of the best pieces of
Yeah.
hunting content. You can make fun of me all you want. Andy certainly will. I've never watched hunting content that's brought a tear to my eye,
Yeah.
and that video brought a tear to my eye. Like, I'm getting goosebumps right now talking
Yeah.
about
We
that.
produced it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing,
Phil Craft
amazing
did. Yeah.
piece of
Yeah.
media. And I actually copied that, and we're releasing a video with my buddy Bo for Father's Day. I'll show you when we're done. It's called Mountain Man Joe, about his dad, who is a great staple in the hunting community, but also an amazing man, amazing father. And in the Bible, and I don't want to get biblical here, but it's, if anything, it's a good way to reference and understand life. If you're even not going to look at it supernaturally, if you're going to look at it pragmatically, um, you know, you'll know them by their fruit, is something that sticks out to me in the Bible as I read. And Joe has built a family of hunters, but more importantly, good men and good people. and everyone there, they love each other and they're really interested in everybody else's success and helping. They would drop and do anything for anyone, give you the shirt off their back, as cliched as that sounds. But we recreated a video and produced it about Mountain Man Joe, and with Sitka, we'll be releasing it on Father's Day,
Oh, really
or
cool.
maybe a couple days before Father's Day. So, but a lot of that came from that video.
Wow.
A lot of the ideas and
Yeah, yeah.
like there's his grandfather, Joe's dad was a smoke jumper in Alaska.
Oh,
So
wow.
we've got some of that old footage in there and him chopping wood up in Alaska and doing the smoke jumping and all that type of stuff. So anyway, I'm super excited about that, but it speaks to your question about why did I decide to go the hunting route? Well, hunting's really close to my heart. I love hunting. And again, cliches are useful because it's something everyone understands. So I use cliched speech sometime, but I'll do it. When I was in the military and planning an operation, there's a couple of really big operations. I headed up the intelligence gathering capacity for the largest media producing operation. We were in Afghanistan, but this place was in Pakistan where they were doing like the Inspire magazine and all of that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
It
yeah.
all
I
came
talk
out
about
of
that a lot.
yeah, it all came
Fire.
out of this place.
Yeah.
And they were doing really high level media production, like glossy stuff and stuff they were using to recruit and bolster their effort. And it was a large media facilitating operation. I got told by the commander at that time, I think his name was Coltrup, Bill Coltrup. Maybe I'm confusing his name. It doesn't matter. But he was in JSOC at that time and said, Chief, I know who you are. I know what you've done. Like, cry havoc, let slip the dogs of war. Like, we need to kill all these guys. So I was like, I need airplanes. I need helicopters. I need overhead assets I'm going to get from the NSA. I need all of your guys' sensitive site exploitation for the last couple of years. I'm going to go through it all. I need a team of guys who I can send out and do analysis. Like, he just gave me a blank check. And we did this huge operation where it was the largest media take throughout the global war on terrorism. Like I got, written up in my Legion of Merit, like it was the whole kit and caboodle. And that for me was a culminating event towards the end of my career. And the sense of purpose, the sense of like, I never felt good about Iraq. I never felt good about a lot of places that I going, but these guys were shitheads. They were they produced the content that the Snarnev brothers used to conduct the Boston bombing.
Yeah.
Like to it was the pressure cookers.
Yeah.
They got that from Inspire.
Yeah.
And so
They're
these are
radicalizing the entire
they're
globe.
everywhere
Yeah.
and doing it with this really glossy stuff. And that operation and sending guys like you in there, knowing I'd isolated for every variable and collected every piece of intel and then trained them on what I called advanced site exploitation, which we can talk about afterwards
Oh,
again. I
interesting.
never got that briefing on what
Yeah.
I can talk about or not, but
Yeah.
we did some really, we did some really cool stuff that ended up leading to more operations outside of that one. And that was kind of like the feather in my hat before I left the military. The reason I say that is the sense of meaning that I got from that. And that, okay, despite all of the other bullshit I don't believe in, I believe in this. And this went down. No one got killed. The intelligence was there. Bad guys got killed. It led to other operations, and it was a rounding success. That sense of meaning to me, I can only recreate in the woods. Like that, like
Oh, interesting.
when
Yeah.
I'm scouting for a whitetail, like 2 years ago, I killed this whitetail in Pennsylvania that was 12 years old, which is like a 120-year-old man.
Yeah.
That everyone knew about. He had a massive rack. He was really old. Everyone had a nickname for him that lived in that area.
Yeah.
Everyone knew who this deer was. And myself and some other buddies were all hunting this deer and put it together. And I approach targeting a whitetail, again, as cliched as it sounds, a lot like I approach putting together a military concept of operations, like variable analysis, reduction of entropy, focus on what we know, and then back plan from there. And I killed that deer 2 years ago. And you're tracking this elusive thing that doesn't want to be found. You're putting together the clues that they leave you. You're doing your variable analysis, you're putting it all together, and then it all comes down to the moment of truth where you're delivering a payload, right? Like in this case it was an arrow, or in other cases it was bad guys on the objective. And I get like a buzz from that I really can't describe. Like it's like a heightened sense of things. It's like I'm in the place where out of everything I've done in my life, this is a place where I need to be, and it's all coming together. And I get this, like, it's probably what kept guys 10,000 years ago chasing a woolly mammoth, right? And I think it actually, I think I have extreme ADHD. I see it as a superpower more than I see it as a like, I'm annoying to talk to, and my wife gets frustrated by me, and I get really focused on things where I can't, let things go until I've finished a problem. But I imagine that that's what guys needed 10 or 15,000 years ago to track and stay on a mammoth for 3 weeks,
Interesting. Yeah.
barely eating or whatever. And I think that we call it ADHD. I don't think it's really a disorder. I think it's the properly poised person that needs to be able to go out there and chase something and be solely focused on something, and the tribe survives because of it.
Oh, interesting.
And I feel like that feeling, that sense of meaning I get from hunting, I was only able to recreate in the military, and I don't know where else I would get that. So that's why I chose hunting. Again, I apologize to your listeners. I have no short answers.
No,
Um,
that's it's amazing like how you frame that.
it just, that speaks to me at a very deep level. And I do a lot of things to try to recreate that. For many years, my buddies and I would do a whitetail hunt in the mountains of Maryland, like northwest part of Maryland, where I'd have my wife lock a cooler, and the food and the beer was in this Yeti. We'd lock the Yeti, and she had the code. I had to send her a picture of a dead deer before we could get the cooler opened.
Ah,
So we go out there and
setting
we
constraints.
do a
Yeah.
fasted hunt. We'd be 2 days without eating, just drinking salt water
Yeah.
and getting after animals. It sounds so crazy, but when you're with like 4 or 5 guys and you're like, whether you're not eating for the next 5 days or someone's going to get it done. We
Oh,
never killed a big
that
buck.
predator drive.
Yeah, we never
Yeah.
killed a big buck, but we would kill a doe. And like
You're
everyone's
hungry.
like crying, and
Yeah.
like seriously, like grown men, like two of the guys were operators, and we're like, oh my God, this is the best day of my life. Like, oh my God, like tell me all about it. And we're sitting there on the fire at 10 p.m. and the back straps on the fire. And then we text the picture to our wife.
Oh
Like, I'm
man.
getting goosebumps
Me
right now
too.
talking about it.
Yeah.
And then you open the cooler and you're just like, oh, I
Oh.
love all of you guys. This is the best thing I've ever done. Like, I can't get that anywhere else. And so hunting to me was the first natural outlie to say, A, do I have what it takes to go the entrepreneurial route, which is to yet be seen? And B, am I doing something where I really care about the mission, really care what I'm doing? And is the product itself going to be good for everyone writ large? Lots of products get made like a Facebook or something where you're the product,
Yeah.
and it's pervasive and it's predatorial in a way that they design the app to make sure you're engaging with it. They use the color blue because
Yeah.
some psychologist said that this is the optimal color that people want to interact with, and the likes, and it's predatory in a way. It's good that you get to keep contact with the grandmother and send her pictures and she can see
But
what
that's
you're
not
doing.
really what you're doing on
Yeah,
that.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
you know?
And but what I'm saying is everything in life is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Nothing is just bad and nothing is just good. And people who look at things that way are dangerous people. And we see that evidence in what's going on in California right now. Like
Yeah.
police, borders, this is only bad. And
Yeah.
that entitles me to beat the shit out of someone or stomp on a car. I'm sorry, can I swear?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so like that entitles me to do this. That is dangerous, especially when it's weak men doing it.
Yeah.
When weak men with no meaning, as we talked about before, suddenly get meaning, it's a radicalization thing where it's like, I get to make up for all of my years where I wasn't fighting this fight. So now I'm going to go blow myself up, or I'm going to curb stomp a cop, or I'm going to break down a system. And I'm going to do it in the name of a country that I would under no circumstance go to. But I'm going to go and do it in this country where I want to stay. And I'm going to wave the flag of another country while I do it.
Crazy.
And I'm going to do violence against people in a system that I otherwise rely on.
Yeah.
That's how you radicalize people.
100%.
And so all of that comes together for me in saying, when people use my app, I always say, like, you're not going to just use the app and go, the deer are there, right? That's not going to happen. You have to scout. You need to get on the ground. The elk, you got to find them. You know where the herd is. You have to practice with your bow. Your field craft has to be in check. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have a pace plan for your comms, especially if you're out there alone and unafraid in the middle of the mountains. It's an area where you can mess a lot up if you're not prepared. So the app is just a tool in the tool bag to help people do that. But if I can be a 3 or 5% part of that targeting cycle, and it leads to a father and a son taking their first cow elk, or a bunch of boneheads who haven't eaten in 3 days getting their doe and having a memory they'll never forget about, or that every time they talk about it, they get goosebumps, then that to me is a net good. and I want to be part of that.
You brought up an interesting point that I started to see when I came out of the military and transitioning into big game hunting. And most of my hunts I've done, like my mule deer, his head's upstairs, and I'm not a head hunter, but I want to be reminded of how profound that hunt was with that mule deer. But I've done it with buddies like Andy, who's a
Hmm.
former SEAL Team 6 guy, and he's a former sniper as well. And we talked about this a lot because when you transition, I guess as a military guy with a lot of technical knowledge, institutional knowledge
Hmm.
on how to find and fix, let's just take the ballistics component to it, or,
Hmm.
or the rifle component to it. We were shocked at how big country hunters who have to take a long hunt or a long shot really didn't know anything about the rifles.
Hmm.
They didn't know their scope. They didn't know the dope. They didn't know the size of the mil radian reticle in their optic. They didn't know the time of flight. They didn't know ballistics, um, the effects of barometric pressure, density, altitude, and relative humidity.
Which all factor into a long shot.
All factor into a long shot.
Yeah.
And so when we started talking about it, I remember when I got into the hunting game on social media, and people would be like, "Oh, shooting an animal at 500 yards is unethical," and I would say, "Why would you say that?" Well, they would say that because they watched their grandfather or their uncle or their dad shooting a deer from that far and hitting him in the ass
Yeah.
because he didn't know his dope at 500 yards.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, the only consideration for unethical shots, in my opinion, outside of like your gun's not zeroed, you're not a good shooter, etc., the actual uh taking out the variabilities is time of flight.
Hmm.
Because if a round takes multiple seconds in time of flight to get to that intended target, it doesn't matter what you see in your reticle. When you break that shot, by time the round arrives, the animal could have moved.
Yep.
But outside of that, if you calculate that and you look at what the animal's doing, like the animal's bedded, plenty of people shoot bedded animals. I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
I like to stand them up before I
Hmm.
hit them. But if they're bedded, you might stalk in on that animal, and it might be a second and a half shot or a 2 second shot
Hmm.
outside of 500 yards. So you break that shot, they're bedded, you're going to hit them, right?
Hmm.
I've taken bedded animals before. So I just was taken back by the lack of education of, and also it's a good old boy thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I hunted this way, so you should hunt this way. You take your 7 millimeter, your 7 mag, you go out, you shoot a Coke can, and then you put in, cigarette butts in your ears before you go out.
Yeah.
Just random stuff that you grow up with, and you're like, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
But big game hunting is very different because you can't afford to make those type of mistakes. You don't have a pace plan with combo going into the backcountry here. You'll
Yeah.
just die.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have the right rifle, you'll just miss
Yeah.
or unethically wound an animal. And so what I like about it, and I feel a little bit about this. I have this visceral reaction when you say like all the technicalities in it, because most people would hear that and they go, "Why would you do all of that? That's not necessary."
Yeah.
But what you're doing is increasing the probability of success.
Yeah.
You're going to have a better time focused on the experience with your tribe and your brotherhood,
Yep.
and then you're going to give the animal the best chance of an ethical kill.
Quick, clean kill.
Quick, clean kill. Can you imagine if we just wung operations and we're like, yeah, this house of foreign safe or foreign safe house of foreign fighters, yeah, we don't know how many are there. We haven't really been monitoring it, but let's just fly a helicopter and land on the
Let's
roof.
commit blood and treasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think the more technically involved we could be, the more that we know.
Yeah.
And like, why would you? I mean, GI Joe. It's
Yeah.
like the more you know, it's like knowing's half the battle. And
Yeah.
it's like if you know that, why would you not integrate it? And I think you're doing a real good. Um, I mean, it's like a public service, right? Because you're integrating a lot of the tools that you use to track bad guys,
Hmm.
giving people the best opportunity.
Yeah.
What talk to me about the app, because a lot of people have apps. Your app's very different.
Yeah.
Even the way it moves, the speed at which it moves, the LiDAR integration, the 15 centimeter imagery. Talk
Yeah.
to me about the app and what was the intended purpose of all the things that you developed in it.
Yeah, so you talked about app development before, and being in the military, I know how app development goes really bad
Yeah.
and how it is executed incorrectly, and examining the commercial sector and the lessons. I've seen hunting companies that have to fold up because they did all of their development in China.
Yeah.
So like everything got done over China, and then now they have a successful app, and then the Chinese say, well, now instead of $150 an hour, it's now $600 an hour, and oh, by the way, we have your code base. So if you don't want to pay this, you're done. And
Yeah.
that literally happened to a camera company in the hunting space. I think they were called, I'm going to get it wrong, but I think they're called Exodus, I think. But that's exactly what happened to them. The Chinese were like, yeah, well, we've got everything. So if you want to keep doing this, you need to pay us another $1.5 million.
Wow.
And they're like, well, it's not in the numbers and we didn't project for this. And they're like, well, we've got the code. So do what you do. So I looked at that and I said, how do I build an application that's done in the US? All of our back end developers, 3/4 of our front developers, our web develop, like all of it's getting done in the US. We do have a designer and one guy who works on our client that are in Portugal. I'm fine with Portugal because they're Western European, and we have laws with them where if they violate something, we can take them to court. I made them incorporate, or I didn't make them. They agreed to incorporate in the U.S. so that those couple of guys out of my like 25 guys, 2 guys are overseas, 3 guys. Um, I could, I knew that I could develop something and I would have the code base, and all of the back end is done by myself and 2 other guys. All of the neural networks are done by 2 other guys and myself. All of the Android, all of the web app, and the only thing we depend on is design and one other developer. And we're going to move all of it to the US. That was the first thing, was clean, efficient code, because there are coders and there are developers.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, there are shooters and there are operators, right? Like I wanted it from the very beginning. It was like, we're going to do unit testing on our code. It's going to be the smallest amount of code possible to execute the function that we need. There'll be no fluff. When you look at like our code base compared to other companies, we're probably a third of the size, and that we're just doing it as cleanly and as smallly and only as much as needed to get things done, and do it all in the US, or most of it in the US. And a code base that we own and a product that we own, where none of my competitors can say that. They all, most of my
Offshore, most
competitors
of it.
offshore all of their development, and it might be their marketing team and their research team or their chief staff or something that are in the US, but most of it's overseas. I didn't want to do that or go that route because the inherent risk associated with it, but also I knew that I could do it with a much smaller team because that's how I'd done the military. It's like, you've got 7 guys to do this up, you know, constraint drives creation and innovation. So if I have a constraint forced on me, it's kind of like movies. If you give someone $100 million budget for graphics, that's where they're going to focus. They're not going to focus on story or character or acting. They're going to focus on, how do we make, this bad guy look as bad as awesome as possible. And we're going to use, in other words, they focus themselves on something where the sky is the limit with technology, but now they're forgetting about story. They're forgetting about substance. They're forgetting about character and character arc. And that's how you get the movies that we're seeing these days, right? They're just spending a ton of money on making it look as glossy and as cool as possible. And they've forgotten about the story or the narrative, or the archetype that we interact with as people, where we want the archetype of the soldier or of the leader or the guy who integrates his shadow components and overtakes an enemy. And Hollywood is dispatched with a lot of that and focused on production, glossiness, and conjuring old ideas or old movies and just updating them. Like, look at Disney.
Yeah.
Like, they took one of the greatest movies of all time, Lion King, and they focused on CGI and technology. They dropped all of the narratives, which it's essentially Hamlet, right? The
Hmm.
Lion King is Hamlet in a cartoon form.
Yeah.
And I loved that movie when I was a kid. And then I take my kids to the new one, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait for like to see this new update. How is everything going to look and everything? And it was a shit show. Like, you watched it and you're like, they changed the story. They focused on equity and all of this other crap,
Oh
and they made it
no.
look glossy. And you're like, oh,
Did you
just
go home and
killed
rip
it.
down the Lion King
Yeah,
poster from
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah, exactly. All of my workout was cleansed up the workout room.
scrubbing the tattoo Lion King
Yeah,
tattoo?
yeah, yeah. And that's what app companies do too, is they'll focus on technology and margins and development and say, I can, like Apple or anyone else, I can pay a Chinaman 10 cents an hour or I can pay an American $25 an hour, and I'm only going to focus on the margin. And so I took the anti-pattern to that. And one of the things that from the age of 35 until now is anything that I'm being told, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a crazy guy. I do my fair share of prepping and other stuff, but anything I see in mass media, Disney, television, I don't care who's producing it. When they say something, I almost say it's the anti-pattern of what they're saying.
Mm,
So when they say this is what's going on here and it's because of this, it's like, no, it's probably the opposite of that actually.
absolutely.
And that's what's happening in tech and development. That's what's happening in Hollywood. That's what's happening in education. Um, and it's it's been a really useful heuristic for me. Heuristic in that it's probably not the whole answer, but it's a system that works well enough for me that I can look at say things and say it's probably 180 degrees out of phase with what we're being told.
Mm,
And I think people are experiencing that, waking up to that now, that whether it's news, media, the judiciary, um, business, politics, what you're being told, it's almost the opposite.
yeah.
And if you operate under that heuristic, you'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
And that's an abortion of truth and logic.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go the opposite way of Spartan Forward. So let's do as much as we can here. Let's focus on a small team that is constrained by their size that will drive us to innovate, that will drive us to hire the best developers. It will hire us to do the best design, force us to do the best design, and not skip on quality or details. And that was why we went that route with it.
All right. So when you look at the hunting space,
Mm-hmm.
um, I love the hunting industry.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really cool. It's very different than many other spaces. How much competition do you have? Because I know there's things like Onyx, right?
Yeah.
But that's very different than what you're trying to build. Because
Yeah.
again, like you look at the quality control, you look at the attention to detail, and the specific things that you're um, integrating into the app. Do they even come close to what you're trying to do, and what separates you?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the first thing I talked about, which was they're more focused on the in the field type of stuff,
Yeah.
which is fine. And they're obviously a massive company, and they've had their own successes, but they don't focus like I showed you our large language model where you can essentially learn and get no BS input on. I want to learn how to do intersection and resection. I want to know how to shoot an azimuth. I want to know magnetic north versus true north. I want to know like what does 265 mean and
And that's AI integration.
yeah, that's AI integration to learn and embolden people to learn and know that they're not getting a bullshit chat GPT that's going to throw a bunch of gobbledygook in there as well. Like we train our own model, our own retrieval documents. It's got our substance in there and my character in that we're trying to focus on getting outside and learning, but also again, reduction of entropy. So if you're like a 17-year-old kid who watches, Rogan or Evan go kill a big elk somewhere, and you're like, I want to do that. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. They can get on our app. Like we offer a free app, which costs us a lot of money every year, where it's free, 3 maps, topo, um, a lot of the configuration, drop points, and we also do free land ownership stuff. So if a 17-year-old who's got no money watches you guys kill a big elk somewhere or a whitetail or whatever and is inspired to do that, they can use that free app. They can get out there. They can learn. If they want to pay the $8 a month, they can get on the large language model. Hey, what arrow weight do I need to be shooting? What does spine mean? What is MOA? Even getting into the more technical shooting stuff, like how, what optic should I be using for low visibility predator hunting of coyotes, or what's a good bargain optic that I can use, or if you want to do that, I wouldn't suggest that, but how do I get my foot in the door and understand things in a way where I don't have to go to a bow shop and get treated like an asshole for an hour because I've never fired something, or I don't know, how much weight I should be pulling or what weight I should pull in order to kill a white-tailed deer versus what I need to do to kill an elk, or how does my arrow setup need to be? What do my grains need to be? You can learn all of that yourself and enable yourself so that you're comfortable talking about these things when you get to the point where you got to get to that bow shop and like, I need to be shooting 48 pounds or 50 pounds and I need these types of arrows. And I'm going to do urban whitetail hunting because I live in the south side of Chicago and there are places where I can apply and go and hunt locally because I don't have the money to go and drive somewhere and do this. how do I enable kids to get into that meaningful part of culture that's physiologically in us at a very deep level, where they're bringing home, they might, like myself, they might be growing up in a trailer somewhere with a single mom, where if you're bringing home 70 pounds of venison, you've changed the game for her. You've found deep meaning in yourself. You've supplied for your family, and you're doing something. So that's why we offer like the free app and that stuff. But to answer your question about the big difference, I would say A is that's the focus, which I would argue is not the focus. If you evaluate people in an existential view, which would be like someone can say, I'm a big believer in Christ. And then that night we're out and he's hitting on every woman in the bar while his wife's at home, or he's beating the shit out of somebody out back or something or whatever. It's like he can say he's a big believer all he wants, but when I watch him in his life, pragmatically, I know he's not a believer. He's just saying that. It's the same thing with these app companies. They can talk about access, or they can talk about wanting to increase lands or whatever, but then you look behind the scenes and you're like, well, the owner here just landlocked 10,000 acres of public land,
Mm.
or they are putting people on their YouTube channel who are killing for blood and gore, or they're sponsoring an event where it's a really bad look for the hunting community. Like when other people see this, they're going to be like, why are hunters doing this type of stuff? And they're sponsoring that type of content because it gets clicks and links and views. You'll never see us do that. Like I won't do that. I only surround myself. I try to, my biggest thing has always been, I'm not the best technologist. I was a shitty NCO. I'm not the greatest leader. Um, but I do have a sixth sense, and it's probably from growing up around addicts,
Mm.
where when I meet someone, I'm like, this is a genuinely good person, or this is not a genuinely good person. And this is and I've hired and surrounded myself and worked with people who I know in my core that they're a good person who will do what's right ultimately most of the time, and they won't sell out the long game for the short game.
Mm.
And the long game is reinvigorating the culture of hunting and base it in the right reasons for hunting, which are the reasons that I've talked about thus far. So I would say strategically, or from a 30,000 foot view, that's the difference with Spartan Forge and competitors and other people in the space. The second thing that I would say is we are focusing on that entire targeting mantra, and not just the in the field stuff or whatever. We're doing the large language model, we're doing the animal prediction stuff, the lidar stuff. The historical imagery update we're about to drop is going to canvas most of the whitetail states and 65-70% of the US, this 5 to 15 centimeter imagery. We are interested in pushing technological capacity as far to the edge as we can, while still maintaining that ethic. And so, and it also goes to my addictive personality, but I'm just as likely to, I carry a Winkler knife, and I love my Winkler. Like they're great knives. Or Montana knives are great knives too, but I love my Winkler because I've been carrying Winklers forever.
Same. I carry one.
And I love that knife, and obviously there's a lot of technology and innovation and work that goes into that. But I also like to flint knap and make old flint knives, and I love using my GPS app that I'm developing. But I also like an azimuth, or I also like understanding sunrise and sunset, and orienting or dead reckoning and that type of stuff. So my challenge, or how I comport myself as a human in the world, um, is I try to have one foot steeped deeply in an understanding of where we come from, how you would do all of these things if the bombs were to fall, or a solar flare, or the lights were to go out, or we had a flood in North Dakota when I was a kid, where the whole eastern part of the state was underwater and there were no services. And I remember looking at adults who didn't know what to do.
Mm.
Like, what am I like? We were waiting for the National Guard to come get us out of our house in boats.
Wow.
And we're on the second floor, and the first floor is totally flooded. And it's like, that had an impact on me as a kid, where I was like, these adults don't know what the hell they're doing. Like, we're not eating right now. There's no clean water. There's no flush toilets. And we're waiting for Bill Clinton to land on the tarmac, literally, to mobilize the National Guard to get people out of their homes. And that had, and a lot of things I did growing up, primitive camping. I talked about it with Logan yesterday, these things called rendezvous. But I think it's paradoxical to say as an app and an AI guy, but I want to have one foot just as deeply based in primitive technology and understanding how to do things on your own as I want. Like, it's kind of like with kids, like they're learning mathematics, they want to pick up a calculator. It's like, no, learn how to do long division, learn linear algebra, learn the basics, and then pick up the calculator
Mm.
and use the calculator. But if the calculator fails, this is a time in memoriam. We've been saying this stuff, right? Like, yes, use the Iridium, but you need to know how to get up on SATCOM and get the 117 and the crypto loaded, or you need to know how to create an emergency activation signal on the ground for a helicopter to see, or pass messages in plain text using call signs or whatever it is, so that when everything else fails, you still have a way to do things. So, and that I would say is the overall difference with us in Spartan Forge, is that we're still giving them all this technology, but we're also giving them a large language model where they can learn, okay, this is great. You told me about sunlight and how to evaluate all this stuff. Now, how would I do that in the field if I didn't have your app? And our app will tell you that. And
Oh,
you can
wow.
learn that stuff.
Wow.
So that's the focus for me.
Yeah. So
And
never getting rid of the basics.
never,
Yeah.
no, the basics have to be there, right? Like you can get into all of the John Wick cool guy stuff you want when it comes to firing, but if you don't have a solid base, the isosceles, present your Kevlar to the enemy, 8 yards and in, and you're ready to. The cool guy stuff doesn't matter at that
Yeah.
point, right? Like you have to have the basics down. If you don't have the basics, then you're dead in the water,
Mm.
or you're reliant on a system that it will inevitably fail.
Mm.
And that's kind of my mantra.
So you look at the app now. Where are you at with features now? And then what's going to happen in the near future that people could look forward to as far as development? Because I know these things change
Yep, yep,
rapidly.
yep. So we had this 5 to 15 centimeter imagery that was like 30% of the U.S.
What
Um,
does that mean, 15 centimeters?
5 to 15 centimeters means if at 5 centimeters, if I place a baseball on a black tarmac, you can see that baseball from the airplane. So you can see it on the imagery.
So you're flying airplanes that are tracking the imagery versus a satellite,
Yes,
which
yeah,
would be
yeah,
a pixel. You would be a
yeah,
pixel
yeah.
versus a
And,
baseball.
and we offer the basic imagery as well that all of our competitors do, but we offer this 5 to 15 centimeter stuff. So and you can go back in time. So if you want to see it, like if you're scouting, most of the imagery that you get from most of these apps is what I call leaf on imagery, where like there's foliage. You can't see a lot of what's going on. You can't tell the change in species of what's growing on the ground, the vegetation, that type of stuff.
Even through seasons.
Even through
Yeah,
seasons. So
yeah.
you can go back in time in hours. Like when we were
Wow.
looking at your house before, you can see
Yeah.
the leaf off,
You
leaf
could
on.
see when I moved back into the house
Yeah,
and like my kids are in the backyard running around.
yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
So that's a massive update for us that we've put a ton of money and a ton of time into doing. We'll be dropping that in a week or two.
Yeah.
So we'll go, if they download the app today, they'll see like limited coverage, like I said, 30, 35%, something like that. It will jump and there'll be a lot more historical. And then with any app company, like you develop an app, and then once you get out in the field, you learn how you would want to change things, right? Like you have
Yeah.
a concept, then you develop it. So we're doing a lot of bug fixes, a lot of interoperability, the user interface, the user experience that we've really, our tracks and how you generate your own user tracks. We've got a better system for that. The web app and the side-by-side view. We're updating our LiDAR imagery. We're going to be like 85% of the US will be covered in that high resolution LiDAR that I showed you.
It's sick.
It's so awesome. And then we're building a new raster map for that. So if you've ever seen like Game of Thrones, have you seen that
Oh
show?
yeah.
The introduction where the intro, people can Google the
Do that
intro,
little
the little map,
yeah, the mapped
and it's
thing.
taking you
Yeah.
to the map. We're building a map like that. So when you look at the LiDAR here, you can say, throw a crop layer on, and it'll show you like a little 3D model, a bunch of little corn, but you can see through the corn, so you can see the ground below it. But it'll be like a model. Or when you turn on buildings, it'll show you buildings, but you'll be able to see through the buildings and see the ground. So you're adding more context, but you're also making a slicker map that's funner to interact with than you have with the LiDAR in the past. And tons of bug fixes, log out stuff that we relied on Amazon in the past that was only like an 80% solution we've built ourselves. So this next update will be our most meaningful update of all time. So if anyone downloads the app today, they'll be like, oh man, I was logged out once like I used it for a week and it logged me out once. Well, that should stop. Or, hey, when I click the My Content thing, I get the folder and I have to swipe it down, but now you can push the button again and it goes away. Or the tracks take up too much of the screen. So we fix how the tracks look, adding all of that imagery. And the tagging stuff that I talk about with Eastman's is being upgraded as well. So lots of, I would say, focusing on the basics and making them a lot better and a lot more reliable, while adding a bunch of imagery and other cool tools that I think people will appreciate.
That's awesome, man. Before we close out, last question: where do you see this going in the next few years? Because if you talk to anybody from AI, they have some wild ideas of how fast this technology can integrate in certain industries.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Hollywood, and
Mm-hmm.
basically getting rid of script writers, getting
And
rid of
actors.
actors,
Yeah.
doing AI video. Where do you see the AI integration into your app, and then your app in the future with that integration ending up to be?
So that's a huge question.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep it under 3 minutes.
Yes.
AI is not a good term. That's the first thing I'll
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the AI, and I
People
can
think
get
ChatGPT when they think AI, and
yeah,
that's not AI.
yeah. It's that's a large language model, and AI is really the better word would have been like pattern production at scale is what it would really be, because
Interesting. Yeah.
what we've had, that AI algorithms have been around for 30 years.
Yeah.
Backwards and forwards propagation, the idea behind recurrent neural networks, time-based analysis, convolutional neural networks, or image-based analysis. This has been around for a long time. These ideas weren't thought up in the past few
Yeah.
years. What we lacked was the computational capacity. Instead of using a CPU, which does more like serial processing or one thing at a time, we have TPUs, tensor processing units, and GPUs, which can process a lot more data at one time. And we have a training set now, the internet, where these large language models can learn from all of Twitter, of all of Facebook, and all it's doing is predicting patterns. And a large language model doesn't know what it's doing. It has no idea. It has the key word, and there's a great book by a guy named Roger Penrose on this called The Emperor's New Mind, is the AI needs training data, and it's only predicting what the most likely next word is. It doesn't know what the word is. It doesn't know how the word is used. It can only take the pattern of how all humans have generated language and say, if the first word is the, and the prompt is this, the next word's probably going to be this.
Yeah.
And then they tune those models. But there's no intelligence.
Yeah.
There's no understanding.
Yeah.
The models don't understand anything.
Pattern-based model.
Yeah, and the idea of consciousness is where the idea of understanding comes from, and we have no idea what consciousness is. There are ideas, and they're quantum-based, again, by guys like Penrose. I don't think there'll ever be an AGI, or if there will be, not in the next 25,
AGI.
50. General intelligence. Artificial general intelligence. In
Yeah.
other words,
It won't be creative.
It
Yeah.
can't come up with new ideas. It's
Yeah.
not going to write Mozart. It can take Mozart. It can make something that sounds like Mozart, but it's not going to make up new types of music. It's not going to make up new stories. It'll only be it's only a parasite on pre-existing stories.
Yeah.
Regurgitating what's been done.
Yeah.
Humans, I'll put it very simply for your listeners in this way. Think of AI as, I've taken a Jane's manual for a car, your Jeep.
Yeah.
And I've got, and it's telling me, here are the tools that I need to work on the Jeep. Okay. So say you're replacing your oil filter, and the Jane's manual says you need this for your ratchet to get the oil filter, to get it off, right? If you build an AG, artificial intelligence out of that, it can only take the pattern from the book and say, you need this wrench, you need this hexagon or whatever it looks like to attach to the wrench, and then you can take it off. Well, if you don't have that piece, or that piece breaks, and you prompt an AI that hasn't been trained on how to tell you otherwise, it has no idea. In other words, human-generated consciousness has to be inserted into it in order to come up with creative solutions. Whereas you might be, I'm going to take a wrench and attach it to a ratchet strap. I'm going to ratchet the hell out of that oil filter. I'm going to attach my wrench to it. I'm going to take it off. And artificial intelligence can't do that.
Creative adaptation.
Yeah. Heuristical inference. A heuristic is like, for people listening that don't like that word or haven't used it before, is like a good enough way to do things.
Yeah.
But it's not based in science. It's just, I have figured out a way to do something. And then the role of the mind is not to learn. The role of the human mind is to make conscious thought unconscious. It's like when we talked about getting off your hip, isosceles, like you do that enough and you're not thinking about it anymore. It's being migrated to a different part of your brain where now it's unconscious. The brain's job is actually to filter. Our eyes focus, and I'm not looking at the outside of me, whereas the machine's looking at everything. I'm looking at you, I'm thinking about you, and our interactions can become unconscious where I know what you're going to say, you know what I'm going to say, and we can come up with creative solutions that we otherwise wouldn't have thought about.
AI can't
Machines can't
replicate
do
that.
that, any of
Yeah.
that. And so and what they're saying is in the next 5 years, there'll be a general intelligence. Again, Penrose goes into intelligence is probably quantum based. We have these things called microtubules, and there's a collapsing of a wave function that allows us to have conscious thought. But the role of the mind is to take conscious thought and make it unconscious. In other words, coming up off the hip becomes unconscious. Machines won't be able to do any of that. So in the blandest sense of the word, general intelligence, I don't think will ever be achieved. And AI will be just another tool. We're going to keep calling it AI because it's a marketing term that's grabbed the zeitgeist. It's more pattern recognition and pattern prediction. To speak to your question, how do I think this is going to go in the next few years? I think companies like mine in 10 years will become data providers and
Mm.
data custodians and data deployers. And you'll be able to take your app, you'll be able to tell a machine in 5 years, I want a mapping app where I can drop pins, I can do X, Y, and Z, and I want it to have these colors, and I want it to present data in this way. And here are the data repositories that you're going to leverage to do that. And the machine will build the app.
Mm.
And so today I have developers building apps. In the future, it'll just be data brokers and data consumers, and then there'll be pattern recognition or artificial intelligence in the middle that will just build you what you want.
Mm.
I'm not the type of guy that looks at this and says it's going to replace all jobs. It will replace some jobs, just like cars replace horse-drawn buggies, or just like, I'm not in a Luddite in the way that we can't have AI because it's going to, I'm not a Philistine about it. It's not, I don't think it will replace everything. We're still going to need genuine ingenuity. We're going to need art that speaks to us. One of the things that I think is really going to come out of AI that's going to be great is we're going to get back to local theaters. We're going to get back to plays. We're going to get back to watching. My wife is a classically trained Irish dancer, and she's really into Irish dance. We're going to get back to watching someone do Shakespeare, and it's going to be a local thing. The family,
I love that.
because AI is going to make it where you're like, hey, I want Avengers, but Andy Stumpf is Thanos, and I am Captain America. Make it, and that's gonna be cool for a year, and then you're gonna be like, I'm not an artist who can make a movie or a
Yeah.
compelling
You're
narrative.
like, where's the comic book?
Right.
I need to actually read it.
I want to go to the theater. I
Yeah.
want to see Mike and Andy on stage acting this shit out. And I do believe that's what's going to happen. People will start looking at paintings again and be like, wow, look what humans did with a brush. A machine could never do this.
Interesting.
Someone thought this up. Someone made me look at a grasshopper painting and think to myself, I've never seen a grasshopper until I saw this painting. I believe that is what will come out of AI is we will become desensitized, just like we have with our movies. Our movies have become overhyped CGI. Like, look at the new Marvel movies. It's just how much CGI can we throw on forget about the stories, forget about the actors.
Yeah.
How much crap can we
They're
throw
filming the
on
whole thing in a room that's surrounded by green screen.
green screen.
Bungees.
And now what's happening? We're getting back to the John Wicks.
Yeah.
We just want to watch Keanu, clear a room.
Yeah.
And I want to get back to the narrative, and I want to get back to the substructure. I believe that will be the output in 15 years. Is that you and I will talk about when we get together with our wives or whomever. We're going to go into the new Hamlet downtown.
Yeah.
That's my goal, or where I see it going. And to speak to I'm sorry, no short answers. To finish the thought here is what will happen is there will be data brokers, people who are going to go out and collect data. They're going to collect aerial photography. They're going to write stories. They're going to do things.
Upload it to the cloud.
Machine will consume it, and then you'll be like, I think books are getting bigger. The sales on them are, how we interact with them is fine on a phone or whatever. People will start writing narratives again, and then there'll be, the Mike Glover story, and someone might say, well, hey, AI, make this into a movie. And then you'll watch it and you'll throw it away and you'll never think about it again.
Yeah.
No one's going to watch The Godfather on AI for the next 30 years. But what we will do is Mike's got a crazy life and a compelling narrative, and he was able to raise himself out of the mire and identify the chaos in his life and account for it and make himself a better man and a father as a result of it. And I want to interact with that narrative. I want to learn from it, and I want to implement his lessons in my own life. And we'll read it as a book, or we're going to see it as a play, or I can make a movie and you'll get 10 cents because I made an AI movie in an hour.
Hmm.
And so we'll have different ways of monetizing, different ways of data consumption. So apps like mine in 10 years probably will be less useful, and it'll be the data.
I feel like we should start a topographical map company.
Yeah, I'm doing it. I started it's called Mercator Labs.
Really?
Yeah, and I already store
Because you
all
could
the,
convert all of that to
yeah,
like
yeah, yep,
holding the.
yep. And then I can sell it to Google.
How
Like,
cool would that be? This, I mean, you probably thought about this, but like just to order all the maps in your area and have them shipped to your door because like I always think about that when you show me my house and the surrounding mountains. I want topographical 1/10,000 scale imagery of everything around,
yeah,
but the hard map.
yep.
So I'm riding motorcycles, going camping, or just as a contingency,
Yeah, it's there if I
I
need
could
it.
have those things.
Yep, yeah, and we're going into that space as well in the next year or so. So
That's exciting.
yeah, I mean, the I just see this as what AI will do, and what people should be afraid about is we're not going to need lawyers like we needed lawyers in the past.
Yeah,
We're not going to need doctors like we needed doctors in the past.
yeah,
Your doctor right now is using ChatGPT to pass his
100%.
exam, and that should worry you.
Yeah,
So maybe start fasting, maybe start taking in some salts, maybe start eating and thinking about it, because that doctor is not going to know much more than you will.
yeah,
And that I see as a net good, because we're going
100%.
to, as long as AI companies like stuff like Musk is doing, where he's like, you can post what you want on Twitter, and I'm not going to deplatform you, and you can interact and have data how you want, and I'm not going to censor it or do things. Those guys will propagate to the top. The information will be available at scale, and then we'll just, hey, my son's got a stuffy nose, or he's a tick was on him, and he's got this little thing, and I'm going to look this up, and now I got to send a picture, and there's a prescription waiting for me at CVS. I
Yeah,
never went to the doctor.
that's how it should be anyway.
Yeah, it should be. So what we're gonna, and that's why these big companies and politicians, bureaucrats want to get a hold of this stuff, because they understand that's going to be the future.
Yeah, they want control.
They want the control. So hopefully people like, Musk and other guys, or the little thing that I'm doing here, will say, no, fuck you. Everybody gets access to everything, and they get to make their own informed decisions. They get to live and die by their own merit, because that's liberty. Liberty is dangerous, but it's also the highest part of our value hierarchy. Liberty is, yeah, I might shoot myself in the foot, but when I'm messing around dumb with a gun, which you shouldn't do, but I'm just saying, yes, that exists. That is a possibility. But also, if somebody comes to that front door, my wife and kids won't have to bury me, because that guy had a gun, was willing to break the law to get it, and I wasn't.
Hmm.
Liberty is dangerous, and the bulwark for liberty is self-education, self-knowledge,
Hmm.
and that makes for a better society, instead of shipping it all off to the government to have them make the decisions for us.
You're motivating me, man. I haven't been motivated in about 6 months. I'm super motivated right now.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, my thing is, how do I reduce entropy in people's lives? How do I get them re-engaging on meaningful pursuits? And how do I do it where I don't break their bank? Like, our app's about half the price of the other competitor apps. How do I do all of those things and get these good stories and these moments of meaning? Because happiness is a shitty thing to orient towards. I don't want happiness. Humans are burden animals. We need meaning. We want to set ourselves up against an ultimate opponent. And even if I don't win using this experiment, I can say I used truth. I stayed true to my values. And although I failed, I can look my kids in the eye. I never want to do something where I can't look my kids in the eye. And if I can do all of those things and it's a success, then that's the best. That's the American experiment. But I often think about like great movies that weren't appreciated in their time. Like, you might watch like the Outlaw Josie Wales that made less than $1 million in theaters. My son and I still watch that, or Jeremiah Johnson twice a year. Or great narratives that Nietzsche wrote in his whole entire time and didn't make more than $1,000 on his book sales. But later, people had an appreciation for what he was doing, and now everyone engages with what he was doing. He was just ahead of his time. I'm fine failing under the heuristic, the rubric that I've built on how I'm going to build this company, as long as I can keep looking my kids in the eyes. And if I fail doing that, then people will look back on it and say, hey, that guy didn't change for the system. He could have taken a bunch of private equity from people that hate the Second Amendment, which I've been offered. He could have made himself a millionaire. I had the opportunity last year to take a bunch of private equity from a bunch of people who were shitty people, and I got to turn them down. It's not because I'm a moral person. Lying is hard because it requires you to remember your lies. The truth is much easier in that I get to state things as they happen and move forward, and I'm oriented towards it, and it makes life simple, and I've reduced entropy in that way. As long as I can keep doing that, I'm happy dying tomorrow. Like I never thought I would say that when in my 30s,
Mm.
but like I'm comfortable with people looking back on what I've done. No, I didn't win the moon. No, I didn't save someone's life or do something crazy or like I might have saved some lives in the military, don't get me wrong, but the guy didn't sacrifice who he was. He stayed true to his principles. He tried to build the best thing possible in a system that was out of phase with what he was trying to do. And, you know, my kids will think well of me as a result of that. And that's really what I'm worried about.
Mm. I
And
love it,
sleeping
man.
well.
All right. Where can people find your app and kind of the stuff that you guys are doing?
You can go to SpartanForge.ai. There's all kinds of codes and stuff out there. I can make a code for your guys' Patreon to give them a really hearty discount.
Yeah, I'll do that. We'll add it to this description
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
yeah, I can do that. And then SpartanForge.ai for artificial intelligence. I should do it SpartanForge.pr pattern recognition, but then people think I'm in Puerto Rico.
Or public relations.
Or public relations. But they can go there, and then we're on Instagram, Spartan.forge, or Spartan Forge, and Facebook as well. And I, as the CEO, I do all of the first line user interaction on social media. I spend almost 3 hours a morning. Every time there's a question about the app, a complaint about the app, a suggested update, then I'll either answer it myself and then farm it out to my guys. So if they have questions about what's coming, you're interacting with me. I have a support staff that handles like second, third order stuff. But it's important to me as the CEO to still be having the finger on the pulse of the consumer and what they want and what they think about what we're doing.
Yeah.
So they can interact with me there.
And you're not getting that from big competitors
No,
or
hell no.
outsourcing to
No,
China.
no,
Yeah.
hell no.
Cool. Thanks, Bill.
Thank
Appreciate you.
you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it,
buddy.
man.
Appreciate you, man.
Yep.